By the 1700s, New Jersey had become a centre for iron, glass and trade, one of the colonies driving America's early development. When the furnaces shut down and industries collapsed, communities were left behind. Vegetation spread over streets. Waterways covered old routes, and the region that once powered national progress was abandoned. Today, fragments of that era still stand across the state. In Batsto village, buildings from an 18th century industrial town remain among the pines. Woolpack Township has stayed largely unchanged since residents were relocated, houses locked as if waiting for someone to return. Waterloo Village, built along the Morris Canal, preserves what is left of the system that once moved coal, iron and goods throughout the area. Stay with me as we uncover New Jersey's most extraordinary wonders, where rare discoveries and forgotten mysteries might change the way you see this state forever. Batsto village once produced iron for Revolutionary War cannons and cannonballs before changing to glass making when the demand declined. At the centre of the village, a mansion stands beside a cranberry bog once harvested by labourers who lived in the building during peak production seasons. Generations of families occupied the workers' cottages without ever owning them, paying rent to the ironmaster, who also controlled everything they purchased. The wooden houses line up so closely that conversations travel through thin walls from one home to another. Nearby, the water-powered sawmill still operates as it did when steam engines were considered modern inventions. During that time, workers were paid in tokens, redeemable only at the company store, creating a closed economy within the village. Even the main house was built with a basement, tall enough to shelter horses during floods that frequently swept through the area. Jersey Shore was once a wild stretch of shifting sand where fishing villages popped up before hotels and piers took over the waterfront. Over time, the coastline moved with every storm, burying old railroad tracks and beach shacks under new sand. To keep ships safe, the lighthouse along the shore blinked out messages, warning of jagged shoals invisible below the waves. Behind the boardwalks, hidden tunnels and basements once stored saltwater taffy and were guarded by stray cats that kept rats away. Farther inland, marshes behind the town connect directly to Wildwood, making the whole shoreline feel like one giant boardwalk from end to end. This site grew as a resort when amusement rides began appearing almost on top of old oyster beds, mixing roller coasters and fishing boats beside each other. Roadways cross water on low bridges, where crabs pile up at night, sometimes covering entire stretches so cars can't pass. Although breakwaters protect the shore, storms often push sand past them, reshaping the marinas and flooding summer cottages. Villages along the barrier islands change quickly, as some buildings are moved by tractors after floods to keep tourists coming. Meanwhile, the marshes teem with foxes and snakes that hunt by moonlight in the alleys between summer homes. Snowy egret is one of the species found here, showing off their vivid yellow feet, good for attracting fish and crabs at dawn. In sunlight, their dark legs flash neon colours, surprising anyone expecting simple black and white feathers. When hunting, egrets stalk their meals with slow, tiptoe steps, sometimes running across piers and railings to shake creatures loose. Then, they freeze suddenly in shallow water, letting ripples settle before stabbing quickly at the flashes below. During low tide, flocks gather on sandbars and play leapfrog, stealing snacks from one another by distracting rivals with wide wing spreads. Meanwhile, a few perch on pier railings, peering down at bubbles for shrimp, while others stride the water's edge in perfect single-file lines. Snowy egrets also stir the mud with their feet to flush out hidden prey, hunting in shallow tidal pools that extend north to Lavallette. This town first appeared as a dock for clam diggers, then grew when families built homes right on top of old boardwalk timbers. Its small towers once stored rescue boats ready for hurricane season, but now they just display flags above ice cream shops. The waters around Lavallette are filled with hidden sandbars, forcing boat drivers to zigzag wildly just to reach deeper channels. Boats often leave at sunrise, racing away before the sand shifts again and blocks their path out to sea. The boardwalk's final curb marks a jump-off to where Sanderlings chase the waves. These small shorebirds dart like wind-up toys at the tide's edge, barely pausing as the surf rolls in. Their short legs and pale feathers blend into frothy sand, fooling crabs until they pounce fast for small bites. Sanderlings sometimes run so quickly that their reflections blur, dragging across wet beaches in streaks of white. Groups preen on driftwood, stretching one wing at a time as gulls circle nearby, waiting for leftovers. Hares dig tiny wells in mudflats for hidden worms, poking so deep that shell fragments bounce out from under their beaks. Sanderlings also use small ruffled feathers on their heads that rise when startled, making them look like they're wearing spiky hats made of sand. Feltville began as a printing factory town where workers lived right above the mill. Families lived in duplexes with rooms barely large enough to fit beds. The mill owner built the town far up the mountain to keep full control over his workers, who had no easy way to leave. They paid rent to him and could only shop at his store, leaving them trapped unless they leave and reject this setup. When the business failed, it emptied and later turned into a summer resort before being abandoned again. Woods now cover the village so closely that some houses are barely visible through tree trunks pressing against walls. Over time, tragedy also struck. 2 teenage girls drowned in the mill pond, and 3 sisters disappeared in the village, fueling ghost stories that keep people hesitant to visit. Ocean City began as Peck's Beach, where a whaler stored whales before Methodist ministers turned it into a Christian resort that still bans alcohol. The boardwalk burned twice in catastrophic fires, forcing builders to move it closer to the ocean on concrete pilings, while parking lots replaced the original buildings. Summer crowds fill beaches where wealthy Philadelphians built Victorian mansions at the turn of the century, turning seasonal fishing grounds into year-round neighbourhoods. Vacation homes line streets that flood during storms, yet families return each season to the same cottages their grandparents rented decades earlier. Boats dock near the harbour, where shifting sandbars expose mudflats at low tide, revealing groups of fiddler crabs scurrying among exposed roots. These tiny animals wave oversized claws, as if conducting an orchestra, with males performing synchronized displays that resemble beach dance competitions. One claw grows so large that it weighs half their body, forcing them to walk sideways and lopsided across the sand. Their shells range from a muddy brown to a bright orange, depending on their diet, mixing with the marsh grasses until they move. They use their small claw-like tweezers to snip microscopic algae from sand grains, sorting food from waste. The crabs then retreat to burrows dug deep below the tide line, plugging entrances with mud balls to keep water and predators out. At the same time, their eye stalks swivel independently, letting them watch for gulls above while keeping an eye on rivals beside them. Allaire began as an iron furnace town that made steam engine parts, shipped by wagon to boats. It shut down when coal became cheaper and the nearby forests were used up. The carpentry shop later became a French restaurant and even hid a speakeasy in its basement during Prohibition. Workers there built wooden moulds for casting iron cookware and were paid coins worth only 6.5 cents each. The foreman's cottage had a window facing the furnace, so he could check the smoke at night without leaving his room. Row houses stood near the blacksmith shop, where about 20 men hammered iron from sunrise to sunset. The brick square house stood apart from the rest, built by the ironmaster who wanted to stay away from factory noise and coal dust. Long Beach Island began as a summer fishing camp for the natives. It later became a whaling port before railroads brought tourists who built grand hotels that eventually washed away in storms. The coast keeps changing because sand moves north or south with the wind, burying beaches one year and leaving them bare the next. Beach houses now stand close together on tall pilings, after floods proved that building on sand means risking your home. A shark attack once eliminated a college student near shore, inspiring the book that became Jaws and making people afraid to swim in calm water. Waves also hit hard here. Full-blown storms send spray to second-story windows and drive birds like the Magnolia warbler inland for safety. Their yellow chest with black streaks looks like they were painted with racing stripes down their front. They perch motionless on branches for minutes, then explode into action, chasing invisible prey between leaves. Additionally, Magnolia warblers jump from branch to branch so quickly their movements blur, making them nearly impossible to photograph in focus. These tiny birds rest on driftwood pilings and weathered fence posts between flights, perching on the same spots where lighthouse keepers once tied boats before climbing the tower. This lighthouse replaced an earlier tower that erosion toppled into the sea before it could guide ships through turbulent inlet waters. Its builder later became famous for winning a major battle years after completing the tower, proving he understood strategy on land and water. The lighthouse stands at the island's northern tip, where currents from bay and ocean collide, creating whirlpools that spin debris in circles. Red and white bands were painted specifically so sailors could distinguish it from passing ships, whose lights looked identical from offshore. its light at compass points every few seconds, creating a pattern that captains memorise to identify their position in fog. Storms eroded the beach so severely that waves now crash where the keeper's house once stood, and wading birds hunt in the nearby marshes. Glossy ibis feathers have tiny structures that split light into rainbow colours, making them shimmer like oil on water. Their dark plumage flashes bronze, green and purple, depending on the sun, giving them a dramatic, almost comic book look. The colour shift happens because feather barbules bend light instead of using pigment, so they look black in shadow. When feeding, ibis peck underwater without seeing their target, using sensitive beaks to feel crabs and shrimp hiding in mud. They march through shallow marshes in lines, stirring up prey with their feet while stabbing downward at movement. Their curved beaks and red eyes make them look permanently angry, especially when they comb their feathers after bathing. At dawn, groups gather at lake edges, with individuals flapping wings to shake off water before the flock moves to new hunting grounds. Princeton battlefield marks the site of a surprise winter attack, where soldiers from both sides were buried in unmarked graves across the fields. Nearby, the White Clark House served as a field hospital, where surgeons worked on dining tables, leaving stains said to reappear each winter. Metal plaques show where fighters may have fallen, though no one knows the exact spot since the battle scattered bodies across the farmland. Columns standing alone on the grass once belonged to a mansion in Philadelphia, later moved to another estate that burned down before ending up here. They now lead to a memorial grove where soldiers from both sides lie buried together. The area stays quiet and undeveloped, but locals say they still hear faint musket fire on foggy mornings. Lambertville started as a ferry crossing between two major cities before a wooden bridge replaced the boats, and the Delaware and Raritan Canal turned it into a coal transfer hub. Stone buildings along Bridge Street date back to when the town was a stopover, hosting travellers midway through a 2-day journey. The Delaware River switches sandbars constantly, forcing boats to navigate differently each season as channels disappear overnight. Canal workers locked coal barges out of one waterway, floated them across the river using only the current, then moved them into another canal on the opposite bank. Roofs throughout the town lean at odd angles because floods lifted entire buildings off their foundations and set them back down crooked. Waterloo Village began as a canal stop hauling coal across the state, but it emptied when railroads took over. During the Depression, it turned into a hobo camp, then came back to life decades later when rock concerts drew huge crowds. Boats passing through climbed nearly 1,000 feet using locks, an engineering feat few visitors noticed. Smith House was built into the canal embankment, with 3 levels so boats and wagons could load goods easily. Additionally, a nearby blacksmith shop still uses the old forges that once repaired tools for passing canal boats. Each fall, leaves pile thick on old roofs until some collapse under the weight, reminders of a town once forgotten and later revived by music. Cape May City ranks among the oldest seaside resorts, where hotels welcomed guests before railroads even reached the coast. Victorian houses covered in snow look like frosted gingerbread, with turrets and porches buried under tall drifts. The seaside town stretches along a peninsula where 2 bodies of water meet, creating beaches on opposite sides of the same street. Moreover, the city's Washington Street Mall fills with shoppers weekly, walking brick paths laid over what used to be a main road closed to cars decades ago. Clear water along the beach freezes in winter, forming ice shelves that crack and shift with tides, while snowy owls hunt from frozen dunes. These Arctic predators fly south during eruption years when lemming populations crash, forcing them to hunt beaches instead of tundra. Their white feathers camouflage against snow and also blend into pale sand, making them nearly invisible until they move. Yellow eyes glow like headlights when light hits them at dusk, giving them an eerie appearance as they scan for movement. Snowy owls also turn their heads completely backwards to watch behind them, rotating necks in ways that look physically impossible. They hover above snowfields before dropping silently onto mice, using wing beats so quiet that prey never hears them coming. Females show more dark bars on their bodies than males, who turn almost pure white as they age. These winter visitors stay near Cape May Point throughout the cold months, hunting the same frozen beaches until it melts and the summer crowds take over. This coastal park grew around a lighthouse built after an earlier tower collapsed into the sea from erosion that still eats the shoreline. Winter storms are so fierce that houses along the point are abandoned when foundations crack from repeated flooding. The town once extended twice as far into the ocean before waves covered the streets and gardens, forcing residents to move inland. Wealthy families built summer mansions near the lighthouse, only to watch them tumble off cliffs as beaches disappeared beneath their lawns. At low tide, the shoreline exposes ancient tree stumps from forests that stood here before the ocean swallowed the land, attracting turnstones that flip debris for food. These stocky birds earn their name by flipping rocks and shells with their beaks, tossing obstacles aside like weightlifters to reach hidden prey. Their orange legs stand out against grey stones, making them easy to spot when pausing between frantic searches. Interestingly, their backs show tortoiseshell patterns of black, white and rust, breaking up their outline against pebbled beaches. Their wedge-shaped heads work like pry bars, jamming under shells to lever them over and expose crabs underneath. Ruddy turnstones also walk along shorelines with heads bobbing, as if nodding in agreement, stabbing at cracks between rocks. Meanwhile, they ignore approaching people completely, too focused on foraging to notice harbour seals watching from rocks just offshore. These mammals haul out on the same rocks for weeks, setting up territories they defend by lunging at newcomers trying to climb. Their spotted coats range from silver to dark brown, with patterns as unique as fingerprints. Seals snap at others trying to share their rock, biting necks and flippers until the intruder swims away. Pups hop awkwardly across sand like inchworms, moving uncoordinated until they learn to walk on land. Adults dig shallow pits in the beach with their flippers and wriggle into them to escape the wind and stay warm. They also roll in sand after swimming, covering themselves in grit that helps shed old fur during molting season. Double Trouble Village processed cranberries from swampland cleared after loggers cut cedar forests, becoming one of the state's largest cranberry operations before shutting down entirely. Rusty equipment still lies in sheds where workers sorted berries, left behind when the company collapsed and everyone moved out. Wooden houses were owned by the cranberry business owners, forcing workers to rent from their employer, just like the old mill towns. Occupants lived in the village year-round, isolated in the pine barrens with only a single road leading to the nearest town. It earned its name from either two troublesome sawmills or a dam that kept breaking, though no one remembers which story is true. George Washington Bridge opened 8 months early after construction crews worked non-stop. The first people to cross were 2 elementary school students who roller skated from one side to the other. This bridge's steel trusses were supposed to be covered in stone towers over 600 feet tall. However, the coverings were never added because engineers decided the exposed steel looked better. On opening day, pedestrians walked across for a dime, and over 100,000 people crowded the bridge before tolls dropped to a nickel. It was designed to hold a second deck from the start, but that level wasn't added until 30 years later, when traffic grew too heavy. Painters still work year-round to fight rust because salt air and weather corrode the steel faster than they can finish coating it. Van Slyke Castle was first built as a stockbroker's mountain retreat called Foxcroft. It was later renamed after his widow remarried, then abandoned before vandals set it on fire. The ruins include a pool with traces of blue paint on cracked concrete, and stairs leading into an empty basin surrounded by forest. A rusted cast iron furnace sits in what used to be the basement, now open to rain and snow. The mansion served as a summer home before the owner moved in full-time, then passed away, leaving it vacant for years. Hoboken began as a ferry landing where steam-powered boats first connected Manhattan to the mainland, later growing into a busy commuter hub. At night, the city glows with lights reflecting off the Hudson River, brightening streets where warehouses once stored goods before converting into luxury apartments. X-shaped buildings cluster near the waterfront, designed to give corner units views of the Manhattan skyline from both sides. The eerie Lackawanna terminal opened after previous stations on the same spot burned down or collapsed from overcrowding, forcing builders to start fresh several times. It connects trains, ferries, buses and light rail, moving so many people daily through its Tiffany glass waiting room to the Lackawanna Tower. This tower is a replica built after the original was torn down, following storm damage that stripped away its copper cladding. The tower stands over 200 feet tall with 4 clock faces and copper letters spelling L-A-C-K-A-W-A-N-N-A that light up at night using fibre optics. Its copper came from leftover material used in the Statue of Liberty giving both landmarks a matching green patina as they age. For over 50 years, the tower held a radio antenna before being replaced with the reconstructed clock version that matches the original design. Estelville Glassworks melted sand into bottles and window panes for 50 years before shutting down when coal replaced costly wood fuel. Brick arches are now scattered through the woods, leading nowhere because the buildings they once held up have long since disappeared. The tall furnace tower once held pots of molten glass, heated by fires that burned non-stop, glowing orange day and night. Workers lived in small company houses nearby, breathing smoke and falling asleep to the sound of crackling flames. During wartime, the site turned into a munitions factory before being abandoned again, leaving brick ruins from two industries on the same ground. Jersey City started as a collection of ferry landings and rail terminals, where goods moved between boats and trains before bridges and tunnels replaced the waterfront industry. The beach along the Hudson has imported sand, brought in to create recreational space where shipping docks once lined the shoreline. A curved river walkway winds through waterfront parks, built on fill dirt dumped over old piers and rail yards. Skyscrapers with reflective glass facades mirror the water, doubling the skyline when seen from Manhattan. The city grew faster than infrastructure could handle, causing constant traffic jams, with trolley tracks still buried under asphalt. Liberty State Park runs along the waterfront just south of downtown, offering open green space where military supply depots once stored munitions. It sits on reclaimed land that used to be a military supply base and rail terminal before it became a public green space. Tall buildings behind the site cast shadows across picnic areas where immigrants once waited in lines before boarding boats. The Statue of Liberty stands across the harbour, though many visitors don't realise it is actually in New York waters. Ferries depart from the docks to Liberty Island and Ellis Island, making this the closest departure point in New jersey. Overbrook Asylum opened to ease crowding at another hospital. But it soon became so full that patients had to sleep in hallways and basements. When the boiler broke in winter, people went weeks without heat as temperatures dropped dangerously low. More than 10,000 people died within its walls over the years, making it one of the most tragic institutions in the state. Cherry Hill began as Delaware Township, a quiet area of farms and mills. After the war, families left nearby cities and quickly turned open fields into housing developments. The mall became one of the first indoor shopping centres on the East Coast, drawing visitors from several states and making the town a shopping hub. Old parking lots and open grounds are now turning into office parks and warehouses, replacing former racetracks and event spaces. Neighbourhoods have curved streets built to slow cars, often confusing visitors trying to find their way through. Business centres and stores line the main highways, where traffic jams are now common on roads once meant for wagons. Over time, Cherry Hill absorbed nearby villages and towns, forming one large suburb with no clear downtown. Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area was created after a planned dam was cancelled, leaving valleys flooded and villages abandoned before the land became protected. Mountains rise on both sides of the Delaware River, forcing a single road to wind through the gap, while wildlife like bears, eagles, and goldfinches use the same narrow passage. One example species is the American goldfinch, which molts twice a year, changing from bright yellow to dull olive, and confusing birdwatchers who think they see different birds. Males turn brilliant yellow only during breeding season, flashing like flying sunflowers against green meadows. Their undulating flight looks like a bouncing ball as they dip and rise with each wing beat. Goldfinches can cling upside down to sunflower heads, pulling seeds out one at a time while hanging by their feet. They perch on swaying branches that bend under their weight, riding stems like swing sets while scanning for predators. These birds also crack tough seed shells with specialised beaks that work like nutcrackers, leaving husks that pile up below. Goldfinches pause often to look around, their small heads swivelling at every sound, including the pecks of red-bellied woodpeckers hammering nearby trees. These birds store acorns in cracks in tree bark, jamming hundreds of nuts into holes they drill for food storage. Red crowns extend down the back of their necks like mohawks, while their bellies show only faint pink washes most people miss. Their red belly appears only as a light blush on the lower chest, making their name misleading compared to the vivid one on their heads. Furthermore, they emerge from nest holes in dead trees, squeezing through openings barely wider than their bodies. They peck trees in rhythmic patterns that is heard through forests, sending territorial signals other woodpeckers recognise from hundreds of feet away. These noisy birds stop only when Cooper's hawks arrive, freezing against bark as the predator searches for movement. These predators navigate dense forests by folding their wings and diving between branches, slipping through gaps that looked too narrow for them. Their yellow eyes glow in the light, giving an unsettling stare as they watch for prey from high perches. They sit motionless for hours, becoming nearly invisible until they burst into flight, chasing songbirds through thick undergrowth. Strategic, they eat by plucking feathers carefully, leaving piles of down that show where they recently hunted. Cooper's hawks can also swivel their heads almost completely backward, scanning all around without moving their bodies. They take off by dropping straight from branches, using gravity to gain speed before catching air for pursuit. Harrisville grew as a paper mill town that made pulp from river hay. Fires swept through several times until only brick ruins were left standing. The mill became the first major polluter in the Pine Barrens, dumping boiled pulp waste into the same river that supplied nearby towns. After the last fire, vandals and looters took everything of value, leaving only stone walls beside the lake. Families quickly left after the final blaze, loading their wagons and never returning. The property changed owners repeatedly, but every attempt to restart the mill failed. Sayreville grew around clay deposits dug from riverbanks and baked into bricks, then expanded when the canal and railroad crossed paths through town. Houses curve along crescents in some neighbourhoods to give views of marshes and wetlands behind backyards. The roadway system was built to connect factories and docks, creating a maze of routes now filled with commuters. Old rail tracks still run beside some streets, carrying freight trains through residential areas at night. The canal once hauled more coal in a single year than the Erie did along its entire route. Solar farms now cover former factory sites, where clay was once shaped into millions of bricks. Wetlands still divide neighbourhoods, forcing drivers to loop around long tidal zones to reach nearby streets. Trenton became the state capital, after serving as a key river crossing during the Revolutionary War, where troops surprised enemy forces on winter mornings. The city grew around factories that made everything from pottery to steel cables for the Brooklyn Bridge before industries moved away. Aerial views show a grid of streets broken by the Delaware River curving through downtown. Roads meet at odd angles where old property lines from colonial farms still shape modern streets. Empty factory buildings mix with government offices, creating a patchwork of old and modern structures. The golden dome of the New Jersey State House rises above nearby buildings, visible from highways entering the city. New Jersey State House is the second oldest state capitol still in use, expanded many times as government grew. It began small, and later additions created a complex of connected buildings from different centuries with varying architectural styles. The exterior shows layers of construction, with older brick joined to newer limestone wings. A gold dome with a sharp point marks the legislative chamber, visible for miles and guiding visitors downtown. An American flag flies in front year-round, replaced whenever storms tear it from the pole over the Capitol lawn. Different sections hold separate government branches, with hallways linking buildings that were originally independent. Walpack Township was emptied in the 1960s when the government bought homes and farmland to build a dam that was never constructed. Thick woods surround the valley, making entire houses disappear behind overgrown trees until you stand right in front of them. Roads still have working stop signs and painted lines, even though almost no one lives there, giving the town an eerie sense of normalcy. Churches with intact steeples sit locked and empty, with hymnals and pews left inside as if congregations vanished mid-service. The Walpack NJ sign is next to a general store that ran for over a century, before closing when the town had very few residents. Benjamin Franklin Bridge opened as the world's longest suspension bridge before being surpassed just months later, marking Camden's peak as an industrial powerhouse. The city grew as a shipbuilding and manufacturing centre, with thousands working in factories along the Delaware River before jobs disappeared and decline set in. The bridge's blue steel towers rise over the waterfront, where the USS New Jersey now sits permanently as a museum. A Liberty and Prosperity flag flies from its cables during celebrations, representing New Jersey's original state motto. It was designed to carry trolleys, cars and trains at the same time, with 3 separate levels built into the suspension structure. Roads approaching the bridge pass through neighbourhoods where row homes once housed factory workers, walking to shipyards every morning. Massive concrete anchorages are buried deep underground, requiring engineers to dig through river mud and bedrock to secure the cables. New Brunswick became a hub where colonial roads met at the Raritan River, later growing into a manufacturing centre before Rutgers University turned it into a college town. American flags wave from buildings along streets where George Washington crossed during his retreat, showing the city's Revolutionary War history. The university campus covers several neighbourhoods, forming a city within a city, where students outnumber residents, with suburban East Brunswick just outside it. This quiet suburb started as farmland before post-war housing booms turned fields into residential neighbourhoods with curving streets. Office buildings and corporate headquarters cluster near highway exits, forming small skyline pockets amid stretches of homes. From above, the town looks like a patchwork, with older areas showing smaller lots and newer sections featuring larger properties. Shopping centres now occupy intersections where farms once sold produce directly to travellers. The township grew so fast that schools built for hundreds now hold thousands, requiring constant expansions. Atlantic City started as a railroad destination, invented to give beach access to Philadelphia residents, then evolved into a gambling hub after casinos became legal. Downtown businesses thrived when casinos first opened, but then struggled as gambling revenue declined and tourists stayed inside resort properties instead of exploring the boardwalk. Beach casinos line the shore with towers so tall that their shadows stretch across the sand for blocks during sunrise. The Ferris wheel spins year-round, lit with patterns that change colours and create light shows visible from the beach. A water tower shaped like a lighthouse displays "Welcome to Atlantic City" in letters large enough to read from approaching highways. The shoreline erodes constantly, forcing the city to pump sand from offshore to rebuild beaches that disappear during winter storms. Steel Pier extends over the ocean on pilings that survived hurricanes, now holding rides and attractions that replace the diving horses and high-wire acts that once drew crowds. Rutherford-Stuyvesant Estate was built by a wealthy astronomer who used the mansion's towers to track stars before his death left the property abandoned. The brick house stood empty for decades until fire destroyed the roof and floors, leaving only stone walls and archways. Families lived in the estate until maintaining the massive structure became too expensive, forcing them to leave furniture and belongings behind. The ruins include a terraced garden system that once had imported plants from around the world, now overtaken by native forest. Some walls still hold windows, creating empty frames that look like giant paintings of trees. Burlington-Bristol Bridge is one of the last working vertical lift bridges in the region, raising its centre span to let ships pass underneath. It was built during the Depression, using workers who camped on both riverbanks, and finished construction faster than expected. Counterweights for the lift weigh as much as the deck, keeping the bridge balanced so motors only need to overcome friction. The span links two historic river towns that once competed for ferry traffic, ending the boat crossing business entirely. This is New Jersey State, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Quebec, check out this video.